welcome to the special Q&A with Bill Schnoebelen. There's been a lot of people that watched the videos, the interviews, a lot of questions. And so, Bill, thank you so much for being back. Thank you for being willing to answer, the question that people have. So I want to jump into it. We got a lot of questions from a lot of people. So I want to be able to have them, ask you. Some people have advice. Some people are curious. Some people have doubts. So, we'll kind of go through everything. So is that okay with you?
Yeah, fine.
All right. Well, first of all, before we even start the question, I want to thank you again for the Q&A, for all the interviews, for all the time that you put into this. I know you received a lot of messages as well. So, I just wanted to say that first. It's very nice of you, but let's get to the first question. Jonathan Ponce, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Out of all religions in the world, what led you to believe Christianity is the one true path?
Well, obviously I tried a lot of them. And, I think a lot of it was there was this void in my life. And I was trying to fill it with all kinds of different stuff. In spite of, I was baptized and raised in a Catholic church, but there was a lot of problems with that. And I got into all these other things. But when I landed on Yeshua, on Jesus, in 1984. So that's like, a long time ago. It's like that void was filled. And, it reminded me of what he said in John chapter 4. He was talking to the woman at the well. And he said, whosoever drinketh from the living water that I shall give them, they will never thirst again. And that's kind of what my experience was. Once I found the real Christ, not the Mormon Jesus or the Masonic Jesus or whatever. It was like, not that I'm not still thirsty for knowledge, because as anybody who's a Christian knows, the more you study the Bible, the more it opens up. I mean, I'm now on my 35th time of reading the Bible through. And each time something wonderful, something new comes out of it. But in a broader sense, I know and have known for over 40 years that this is the truth with a capital T. And all these other things just sort of fall away. And kind of like Paul says, I count all that stuff as done compared to, Christ.
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people had a lot of people made comments of like, he tried everything. We'll see what happens next year. I'm like, guys, he's been a Christian for probably longer than you've been alive. So he's not going to change anytime soon. Like there was a lot of change in the beginning of your life, but once you settled on Jesus,
Yes.
it stayed like that. So I thought that was an important question to answer first. Another important question, which we didn't talk about, was kind of like, if you read between the lines, you maybe could figure it out. But the question is coming from Melanie. She asked, where was your wife during all of this? What was she doing?
Well, she was basically into all the same stuff I was. And, just for the sake of clarity, my first wife, Sharon, who was with me through all of this weird stuff in Milwaukee and whatnot, we both got saved about the very same time. She figured it out first. And she was with me in the ministry when we started with One Accord in 1992. Unfortunately, she passed away with heart failure in 2009. And I married my wonderful wife, Mary. We just are celebrating our 14th anniversary. So, but yeah, we were kind of, the two of us were on pretty much the same track. She was a little resistant to some of the darker, creepier stuff, but she kind of reluctantly went along with it. But no, we were more or less on the same track, and right up to getting saved and then going into the church and, becoming Christians.
I answered a comment today from someone that asked, why does he say we? Like, who's we? And I'm like, we is, him and his wife at the time, which I think that's pretty much, but we never said that it was your wife in the video. So good
Right.
clarification.
Yeah.
Gal asked, if my deceased grandfather has a good standing certificate from a group mentioned, do I need to pray for curses to be lifted? So I don't know if she's mentioning about Mormons or Freemasons, because I think both of them might have certificates, but what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, if you have, I mean, if you read Exodus chapter 20, right in the little 10 commandments, it says that the sins of the fathers are visited unto the children, even to the third and fourth generations. And so we always advise people, whether they're new Christians or maybe they've been Christians for years and years, to pray and break generational curses. And we have a whole chapter on this in our book, Blood on the Doorpost, on our website. And it also make available sample prayers for how to do this that you can download for free. So yeah, you need to, whether it was a Mormon or a Mason or whatever it might be, we definitely advise people to pray and break generational curses. We have an excellent prayer for that.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot of people that have, especially grandfathers, 'cause like we talked about, I think the Masonic Lodge is kind of fading out. There's not that many people, but a lot of people have grandfather or great grandfathers that were into it. So there was a lot of questions about that. So I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah,
early
it's
on.
very, and I need to explain something. In our experience, that doesn't mean that it affects your salvation. Like if you had a father or a grandfather who was a Freemason, and I mean, you can still be born again, you can still be a good Christian and all of that, but it's going to be like a spiritual drag on your life, if you will. And it might cause physical illnesses, it might cause mental disturbances, it might cause spiritual problems, but it's not going to affect your salvation. So it's not like God is punishing you for the sins of your ancestors, but it is like sometimes we need to get rid of that as part of our process of walking into the kingdom by just praying and asking the Lord to break generational curses. Some people call it ancestral curses, but it's the same thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa asks, I had back surgery at the Shriners Hospital in Chicago in the early 90s. Are the Shriner hospitals purely ministry to children, or is there anything dark going on?
Well, it's both. I mean, I know they do a lot of good, but we've also had numerous people say, because they mainly, and I assume this might have been when she was really young, they minister mainly to children, and they give free, different kinds of medical interventions and surgeries, which is admirable. But we've had a lot of people tell us that their kids were molested while they were in the care of the Shrine hospitals. And that obviously is a problem. So I would advise people, if you're in a tough situation, and I know it's terrible if you have a child with some debilitating illness, and here's this well-known, well-respected institution that's saying, we'll take care of your child for free. That's very tempting. And I would really say, pray about it. Watch your child like a hawk while the child is in their care. I personally wouldn't do it, but I mean, that's me. But I think it's kind of a dicey situation because you can't be with your child every minute because that's not how hospitals work. And I would be very worried, and I would definitely pray angelic protection over the child. I would pray a lot, and I would do everything I could to avoid a Shriner hospital.
Yeah. So we didn't have the time to talk about Shriners in the interview because there's so many things that you've been involved in. But Shriners is essentially, I'm paraphrasing, so maybe correct and give a little bit of clarification on what I'm saying. But it's a branch of Freemasonry. So if people watching
it's at the
know
higher levels. I mean, you have to be either a 32nd degree Scottish Rite or a ninth degree York Rite Mason to become a Shriner. But it is part of the Masonic hierarchy, and in fact, they have this acronym, which ancient. Let me see. It's been decades, but it's the Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. That's their official title, and that's an anagram. Which, if you move the letters around, it spells a Mason.
Oh.
They like to do this kind of mummery, you know. And on top of that, the other problem I have, which I've done a lot of interviews in the last month. You kind of open up the floodgates, praise God. But I may have said this, I may not. But the big problem with the shrine, other than you're on top of this huge spiritual dunghill of Freemasonry, is that it's all couched in Islam. I mean, you're swearing an oath on the Quran. You're identifying that the God of your forefathers is Allah. And, if you're a Christian, that's a problem. So, but we've done like a whole, 30 or 40-minute YouTube video on the shrine, a couple of them, in fact, and they're very given to sexual immorality. They're very given to orgies, and like I know when I lived in Milwaukee, every now and then the shrine convention would come to Milwaukee, and they would literally bus in busloads of prostitutes from Chicago and Madison to help service the good members of the shrine organization that were in town. And people that worked in the hotels would tell us that, they'd see naked Shriners chasing naked prostitutes down the hall, and the Shriners wearing nothing but the fez, the hat they wear on their head that looks like a headgear from the country of Morocco. So it's not a very reputable organization to be involved in at all.
Yeah, I'm glad that we actually had a little bit of time to clarify this. Obviously, we could go in more detail, but we can always go more detail with everything with you. So we'll stay here.
Rabbit trail upon rabbit trail down ad infinitum. Yeah,
but that's the best thing about it. That's the best thing about your experiences. I think God gifted you with that. Talking about the shrine, you were involved with the shrine, but you talked about degrees of Freemasonry. So what, in terms of like, I think, well, you said the York Rite, but what degree were you in the American side of Freemasonry? And a lot of people were wondering if you actually were a Mason. They were asking about if a lodge number. I don't know what that is, but if
every lodge within a grand, every state has a grand lodge. That's how it works in America. And I was initiated in Heartland Lodge number 122, which is in Heartland, Wisconsin. It's kind of a small, distant suburb of Milwaukee. And then later on, because it was closer to my home, I moved to Kilburn Lodge number 3. And that's where I did most of my Masonic stuff. And that was in Milwaukee. So those are the lodges. And basically, I went through York Rite. You have to go through the Blue Lodge, the first 3 degrees. And I did that out in Heartland. And then I went later to join this lodge in Milwaukee. And from there, I did York Rite. Then I did the Scottish Rite. I got up as high as you can in the York Rite, which is a Knights Templar. And then I went up to the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite. So technically, I am not a 33rd degree Mason in the American system. But in the Memphis Mithraeum system, which I think we clarified this in the second show I did with you, I was actually way up in the 90s. I was like a 92nd degree Mason in the Rite of Memphis Mithraeum.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of it that's my fault, but like you said, it's not false. So when I said 33rd degree, you were above 33, so technically that was correct. But in the American side, you were 32nd degree. So if people were wondering, that's the clarification. That's how it works. And yes, there was a little bit of me putting the number 33 so that people will actually watch the video. But it's also not disingenuous because you went higher in the Memphis Mithraeum, right? So there you go with clarification. If you want to get mad at me, you can send me a nice email. I get a lot of them. I'll be happy to read whatever you have to say. Diddy2L asked, I'm a first-generation believer in Jesus Christ, and Masons go back many generations on both sides of my family. I always heard about rainbow girls being under the Eastern stars. My mother and her 3 sisters were in this. How is this connected?
Well, it's like a ladies' auxiliary, if you will. And I'm sure it came about. It's a uniquely American thing. They don't have that in European Masonry. And the Eastern Star is for adult women who are relatives of a Mason. And Rainbow is for adolescent girls who are, again, Usually they have to be some sort of a relative of a Mason. And both organizations have a Mason in their hierarchy. So in other words, in the Eastern Star, the head honchos, if you will, of the Eastern Star are the worthy matron, who's the woman, and the worthy patron, who has to be a master Mason. So spiritually speaking, that means, and I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of headship.
Not so much.
Okay, well, it talks in, specifically Paul talks about the idea of the man being the head of the woman and Christ being the head of the man in terms of a marriage, okay? Well, in a similar way, if you're in any kind of a hierarchical organization, you are under the headship of that organization. That's part of the danger of, say, the Eastern Star. Because even though you can go through the Eastern Star rites, and we have a DVD on this called The Ladies of the Labyrinth, because that's what they call they have this big setup in their, what they do is they just kind of do a makeover of a Mason temple and change the furniture around. And you have this huge star that's an inverted star, an inverted pentagram with 5 points. And each point is a representative of some biblical female character, like Ruth and Esther, and I forget another couple of them. And then they have one called Electa, which references the elect lady that John writes his epistle to. So anyway, the problem is that even though you go through this thing, if you're a typical, because 99% of the people who go through the Eastern Star are some sort of Protestant women. And if you go through it, it seems pretty benign. There's nothing overtly creepy unless you're creeped out by the fact that laying on the floor and in all of the accoutrements, the medallions the women wear, et cetera, is this inverted pentagram, which is a symbol of Satanism. Like if you were to go, well, I mean, if you go to look at the Satanic Bible, right on the cover is an inverted pentagram. If you look at these different satanic organizations, they all have inverted pentagrams as part of their iconography. So that in itself is a problem. But beyond that, there's the fact that there's this master Mason who is, whether he might be a really nice guy, but he carries with him a truckload of spiritual filth from being in the Masonic Lodge. And because he's in headship authority over all the ladies in this particular chapter, that percolates down. And that's why a lot of women and or their children suffer from spiritual problems because of the fact that there's a Mason at the head of this local organization. Now, I'll tell you a true story that happened to the guy that was one of my mentors, Ed Decker. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's now semi-retired. He's in his 90s, but he started Saints Alive in Jesus, and he really started the anti-Mason movement up again in America, which has kind of been dormant. And he put this little booklet out called The Question of Freemasonry. And in that booklet, he had a picture of Baphomet. I don't know if you know what Baphomet is.
Yeah,
the goat-headed guy. Like he's the statue that the Satanic Temple keeps trying to put up. That's Baphomet. Well, anyway, it happened that this nice Christian lady came into this Christian bookstore. I don't know where it was somewhere in a large city. And the lady had, behind the counter, had some of these little booklets, Question of Freemasonry, on the checkout, the checkout place. And the lady looked at it, picked it up, because she was in the Eastern Star. And I said, what's the Question of Freemasonry? Because she had no idea everything. And anyhow, she opened it up, and it happened where the booklet was stapled. It opened up to this picture of Baphomet, and she just about fainted because she told the lady, and then later on wrote to Ed Decker about this, that at night every time she'd go to an Eastern Star meeting, that night she'd come home and this goat-headed thing would come and rape her horribly. And she couldn't figure out it because she prayed. She did all the stuff that Christians, I mean, although most Christians aren't very well versed in how to do spiritual warfare, but she did her best. And she realized this was something that was part of the Eastern Star. So she wrote to Ed. He told her what to do, to renounce the Eastern Star, to send a demit letter, which is a special kind of letter to the Grand Lodge of the Grand Chapter, whatever it be, of the Eastern Star in her state, and get out of the thing. As soon as she did that, these horrible experiences, these visitations stopped. So that just shows how even if the woman herself is innocent and pure of heart and trying to be a good Christian, once you step into this satanic, it's a spiritual whorehouse. I mean, pardon my French, but that's what it is. And the Mason brings that spiritual perversity into the Eastern Star chapter. Even though they sing all these old Christian hymns, I walk in the garden, and all of these nice things. But underneath the surface, it's spiritual quicksand.
Thank you for clarifying. I learned a lot. I didn't think we would get a story from you today, but I can't turn down the story from you, Bill. You're the most fascinating man I've ever heard. And thank you for sharing that. That also highlights the power of God in doing these things. Yes, the demonic realm is real and it's horrible. The kingdom of darkness is more evil than people can realize, but the power of God is greater than also people can realize. So I think that's
just to underline something there, Paul warns us that the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light. And that's the problem with things like the Masons and the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of these groups that outwardly appear to be godly Christian organization, just with a little different theology, but it's much worse than that. And like my friend again, Ed Dicker, used to say, the devil isn't going to show up at your door and try and sell you a false gospel looking like a 6-foot fraud with, fire coming out of his eyes. He's going to show up at your door as these sweet little teenage Mormon missionaries that look like, the most, leave it to beaver people you could possibly imagine. But underneath they carry spiritual darkness.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to another question. We have Jill D, but she's not the only one. A bunch of people ask this. You mentioned many times in the second interview that you were unable to go outside in the sun when you were in your vampire stage. What would happen if you did? And was the reaction purely physical, or was it more a spiritual thing?
Well, it was both, but I mean, I would go outdoors briefly, and I had this because it's a long story, but I had a broad brimmed, the kind of hat the Amish wear.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was studying to be a Druid high priest, the group we were with, we pretended to be some sort of Amish. I had to shave off my mustache and wear this big broad. So I had this broad brimmed hat, and I'd wear it, and I'd wear long sleeve shirts and gloves when I went out during the day, which would always be very briefly. But if I, was caught without any of that, it would burn. It would feel like all of a sudden a real severe sunburn. And I think part of it was spiritual, but it was real. I mean, I would actually go in and how if you stay out in the sun too long, your skin starts peeling and stuff. That happened just from being out in the sun for like 5 or 10 minutes. So just like going from the house to the car.
So the time that you went to the dentist, right? So you would have been wearing the long sleeve and gloves so that your skin wasn't exposed?
Yeah.
And same thing with the when you went, because people were talking about when you went to the bank to to send a check to the Church of Satan, right? Same thing would have happened there.
Well, I just did that through the mail.
Oh,
I just put it in the mailbox out in front, and the postman would take it. But yeah, I had to obviously do errands and things like that, and that's what I would do. I probably looked weird as could be, but I wore long sleeve shirts in July in Milwaukee, which is really hot in the summer. And funny thing is, I never got hot because I was sort of half human, half something else. I didn't sweat very much.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot. And another question that might explain some things, it's anonymous question this time. There's a saying in pop culture that garlic and salt can keep vampires away, and you have to drive a wooden stake through their heart. Is this true or is it misinformation?
Well, see, garlic, I think I'm also a naturopathic doctor. And garlic is one of the most powerful blood purifiers. Um, and I remember going with my wife to a natural food store opened up that was like, and it had produce. And this is when I was into this stuff. It was after dark, but I went in there. And if you've been in a place like that, they'll often have these big ropes of garlic braided together, and you just go up and pluck off a couple of things of garlic and put them in your bag or whatever to buy them. And I could feel that garlic from 10 feet away. It made me itch terribly, just terribly. I obviously don't know about the stake through the heart thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you got to realize, and if people really want to get into this, we have a book. The last book I wrote, I'm working on another one now, but it's called Romancing Death. And it goes into the whole history of the vampire cult, all the way back. You can go all the way back to before the time of Christ. There were these vampiric type entities that are demonic. And there's all sorts of different stories about them. Like there's one that says if you're being chased by a vampire, spill a certain kind of seed, and the vampire will have to stop and pick up every single little seed, and you can get away. I mean, that kind of stuff is, it's just sort of folklore, and it varies. But you see all these different things in all over Eastern Europe, especially, which is where, of course, the Dracula legend, started. And as you may know, there actually was a Dracula who was an historical figure in Romania, who was the Prince of Wallachia. His name is Vlad Tepes, and he was known as Vlad the Impaler. He was a monstrous person, but he's regarded in Romania kind of the way we regard George Washington here in America, because he liberated Romania from the Magyars and the Turks. This was like in the 1400s. So I don't know if the thing of he would stake people. He was noted for that. If he had enemies, he would take them. Well, I won't even go into it because it's too horrible. But he would basically mount living people on stakes, and and whether that somehow worked its way into the vampire legend, because Bram Stoker is the guy that wrote Dracula, the novel, and he kind of codified all of this, if you will. And some of the stuff in the book is true. Some of the stuff is stuff that either he made up for the sake of drama, or else is part of the folklore of like Romania or Transylvania or other parts of Eastern Europe. Now, I don't know, what was the other thing?
Uh,
Was
there
it
was
salt?
no, it was garlic and the stake through the heart. I don't remember if there's another one, but I lost the question now. So,
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, garlic, they do not like garlic.
but
And
that
I
makes sense
couldn't
with the
get
blood
near it.
purifying thing. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. Another question, and we're running a little bit. Well, no, we're not running short on time, but we got a lot of questions. So, uh, I'll try to get to as much as I can.
I'll try and be brief.
But I mean, I appreciate your commentary though, so I don't want you to feel like you need to be super brief with these questions. So next anonymous question: did you feel any physical symptoms during your vampirism other than bloodlust, such as increased physical ability or the inability to see yourself in the mirror?
Not the mirror thing, no. But you see, I wasn't a full-fledged vampire. I was like kind of I don't know what you'd call it, sort of a vampire newbie, a vampire in training. I was told that the full, whatever you want to call it, blossoming of the vampiric nature would not occur until I died physically. And then 3 days later, I would rise as a full blown, whatever. But I did notice I was stronger. I had a lot more vitality. And of course, I was younger. I mean, I was in my late 20s when this was going on. So I was in, reasonably good health. But I just felt a lot more strength, and I could see really well in the dark. I mean, I could see in total darkness. I mean, like I could be somewhere where there's no external light at all. I could see as clearly as daytime.
Hmm. Okay.
Which is handy if you're a predator.
Yeah. And the mirror thing just made me think about something. It's in this, I don't know if it's kind of like a spirit. So if you look at yourself in the mirror, but you don't really exist, you're just a spirit, then you're not going to see yourself in the mirror. So maybe that's what, full-fledged vampires might be. I don't know. I was just like a thought in my head. I don't know if that's related.
Well, there's a whole, we have a YouTube video about mirrors and other portals, because witches use mirrors as portals. They can, I mean, if you have a witch that's after you, they can literally, I mean, if you have a mirror like in your bedroom, a lot of people do, they can come through the mirror and, attack you.
Really?
And we advise people to just pray over their mirrors, just like they pray. We have a whole thing on how to bless your house so that demonic spirits can't get into it. And in the same way, I want to do this just normally, but if you feel like you're really under a spiritual siege, which some people do, I mean, if there's witches that live 2 doors down from them, or if they're an active Christian, like maybe they're out witnessing to people and they're making a dent in the kingdom of darkness, witches are going to come after them. And then I would say, yeah, just put holy anointed oil on the top and the 2 sides of the mirror. You're fine. Pray over it, because it can be an open doorway. And the theory behind vampires not seeing themselves in a mirror is that when you're looking in a mirror, you're seeing your soul. That's a superstitious idea, but vampires don't have a soul, and so therefore they aren't in the mirror.
Okay.
But
So
I
that's where it
never
comes from.
got that bad.
Okay. All right. Well, I did not know about that, but it makes me wonder why in the Book of Enoch it says, I'm pretty sure that it says that the sons of God, the fallen angels, taught them how to make mirrors or something like that. So it makes you wonder if there's a connection there. We got another question. Again, this one is anonymous. In the interview, you mentioned lycanthropes, but you said you had been recommended to choose vampirism. Why?
Well, it was less painful. And I had a friend that was a werewolf, which sounds funny, and he said he was a biker, and a lot of Hell's Angels type bikers. I'm not trying to stigmatize all bikers, but this guy was in the Hell's Angels, and he said it really hurts when you do it, because basically your bones change. You get bigger. A werewolf is actually like probably close to 8 feet tall. And so that, the thing of, like you hear like teenagers go through growing pains, and they feel like their bones are actually changing. Well, imagine that happening in 5 minutes, and going from being a normal, like 5'10" man into being an 8-foot guy. And it hurts. But then when you get there, I am told, you feel incredible. You feel kind of like the Incredible Hulk or something, like you can rip things apart and tear people in two and all kinds of monstrous stuff. But I just felt like the vampire thing was more sexy. It was more in keeping with my personality, believe it or not. And so that's why I went that way.
Believe it or not, the people watching, that's one of the things that got me convinced that your story was correct, because I heard from someone else, not that he wasn't a vampire nor a werewolf, but he was in circles where these things happen, and he confirmed that. He said the same thing, that it's extremely painful, explaining the same thing. So that was kind of the first seed to let me know that, I could trust your story. And maybe one day I'll have that person on. I don't want to mention names before we have anything scheduled, so I'm not going to tell you who it is, but maybe one day I'll be able to talk to him. This is a question that is not necessarily a question that was submitted, but I saw it in the comment and I thought that was interesting. Are energy vampires a thing?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, and to an extent, we all are. I mean, if you have a sick friend and you go to the hospital to visit them, there is actually a thing that happens, assuming you're healthy. You'll go in there and sit with them, comfort them, pray with them, or whatever, and they'll feel better, and you'll go and you'll feel drained. And that is because whatever you want to call it, the life force of the human body can be either voluntarily or involuntarily taken. And there are people that are skilled at this. Most of them are sociopaths that are, they love getting people angry, and then they feed off that anger, and it makes them feel better. And it's a real thing. It's an energy transfer. What I described about the hospital is benign, because the sick person isn't even aware they're doing it. And that's why also you'll see a lot of times people that are like performers on stage. There are all of these people out there, like these rock bands or whatever, and there's hundreds of people out there, waving their hands and yelling and clapping and all of that. They feed off that energy. There's a huge amount of, for lack of a better word, psychic energy pouring onto the stage. And a lot of these, of course, as you probably know, a lot of, musicians are Satanists. A lot of the main huge superstars of the last half of the 20th century were all invested in Satanism. And so, yeah, there are people that do that. I don't know that they actually say, oh, I'm an energy vampire, but yet that's what they're doing. And it's a relatively, day-to-day thing. I mean, I know sometimes I'll be in a store and I'll be checking out, and the person is saying, oh, I feel really bad today. And I can actually feel them pull energy out of me. And I can pray and I can stop it. Because every day I put on the full armor of God, that's in Ephesians chapter 6, along with the whole week. In our book, Blood on the Doorpost, we identify more than 20 pieces of the armor that most Christians don't even know exist. So you might want to check that out. But anyway, yeah, it's a real thing. And it's not usually malevolent. It's usually just the way, water seeks its own level. And if you're feeling really good and really energized, and you get around somebody that's sick or drained or whatever, it's going to kind of, normalize out unless you do something consciously to stop it.
That's so interesting, because I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty not suspicious. Well, suspicious of the idea. I wasn't really convinced about it, but I wanted to ask you because I knew you'd know more, and that actually makes a lot of sense, I think. So I'm happy
It's
that I
part of
asked.
the human condition.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Um. Well,
Well,
I guess.
I can go until noon. I mean, if you want to, I've got 11:50 here. I don't know what time zone you're in, but
Yeah. Well. Okay. Well, we can maybe get a few more in here. So how can this comes from Kaylee. There was someone else asking a similar type of question as well. How can one protect themselves from vampires? And I'll add as well, like maybe dark magicians or something like that.
well, number one, I would say pray. Have an active prayer life. Read the Bible every day. Pray every day. Don't go out. Whatever your vocation is, don't leave the house without putting on the full armor of God. Just like I make a comment in Blood on the Doorpost, a lot of Christians go out every day naked spiritually. They don't know we're supposed to put that armor on, because you go out into the world is increasingly full of wickedness. So if you put your armor on and you've prayed, I mean, there's kind of a real quick, number one, be sure your house is clean spiritually. Get rid of all. We have resources in the Blood on the Doorpost book and on YouTube and on our website, withonaccord.org, about how to clean your house, how to remit the sin of the shedding of innocent blood over your property, which very few people know how to do that. And then put on the armor, go out into the world, be prayed up, and of course, don't get involved in any kind of habitual sin. don't be a gambler, don't be a drunkard, don't be a porn addict, things like that. Because all those things will open doorways for the enemy to come in and attack you, whether it's a dark black magician or whether it's a vampire or whatever.
Yeah. Might I add as well, don't be a glutton, because that's the sin that people don't realize nowadays, and
Oh, yeah.
it's in the Bible.
And don't
so.
be a gossip.
Yes, as well. Okay, so we'll try to rush through maybe quick fire questions to try to get to as many as we can. What happened to the werewolf's body after touching the Bible? Did it just burn or disintegrate? Burn
It
and
just
disintegrate, or
became
did it float?
soot. It left a skid mark on my wonderful carpet, which was beige. I mean, no, nothing was remaining. It was just like a pile of soot.
What do you think happened? Because werewolves are real people. So if that was a person that transformed into a werewolf, how could he just have become soot?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I mean, I would say it could have been a demonic thing. It could have been a humanoid, a human being that was turned into a werewolf. But that's the power of the Bible. That's the power of this book. They can't stand it. And just touching it, just the flames.
Well,
and then
I
gone.
think there's something to the spiritual thing that you said, because at least if you ask me, and even in your story, the vampire that kind of initiated you seemed like a actual spiritual being, not a former human. And so
Right.
if human vampires are a reflection of a true being in the spiritual realm, then werewolves might be that as well. So this could have been a spiritual werewolf and not like a human one. I don't know. That's my thought. I could be wrong. Okay.
Don't know.
This is actually a good one. I'm happy that we got to this one. Is from, well, John Doe. So I guess it's anonymous too, unless that's actually your name. Is there anything you can show the viewers that might be skeptical, some sort of proof of things?
Well, in the first book we put out, which was Joseph Smith and the Temple of Doom, I have all of my certificates, like the Masonic degree certificates, the Mormon certificates. I have the second degree from the Church of Satan. I was made a warlock in the Church of Satan. I have my ordination papers from the old Roman Catholic Church as a priest. I have, all of that. I mean, most of it is documented.
So it's in the book. What's the name of the book again?
The name, well, it's out of print at the moment. We're trying to get it back into print, but it's called, it's Mormonism's Temple of Doom by me and James Spencer.
Okay.
I don't know if you can find it. I mean, we have this stuff available. If somebody is really, well, I say that because unfortunately something was done to our computer and a lot of data got stolen from my main hard drive. And so some stuff we don't have on backup and some stuff we do. But I actually have the original certificates in a safety deposit box. So yeah, we can prove most of this stuff. I mean, I don't have like a certificate from, like the Vampire Society or something, because they don't do that kind of thing. But yeah, I can pretty much substantiate all of this stuff. In fact, I'll just say one other quick thing. There was I won't say the name of it, there was another ministry that thought I was a fraud. They accused me of being a fraud back in the late 80s. They attacked me and my co-author, Jim Spencer. And so they actually sent out private investigators to go to the seminary where I had my degree, to go talk to some of the people that were in the parish where I was an old Catholic priest, to talk to some of the witches that knew me, and they couldn't put a dent in my story.
Well, I think that wraps it up pretty nicely, because a lot of people are straight up, don't want to believe anything that you say because it sounds crazy. But there's also people that are willing to believe. They just are not sure. And so,
well, sure.
I believe you. I haven't found anything, and I did my research. I did a lot of research into this because I don't take on anyone on the show. And with all my research, there's nothing that I could find that wasn't congruent with what I already knew to be true as far as the spiritual realm and the Masonic lodges and everything. Because I've learned a decent amount from talking to a bunch of people, and everything that you say checks out. So I don't have any doubts anymore. But if people have doubts, then I don't. Maybe that book will get back into print somehow. I hope that's able to happen. But at least these questions hopefully show that you're not making this up. That this is actually something that happens. You got answers to the questions that you should have answers to. So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm sure it's going to be a blessing and something reassuring for people. And there was good advice as well in there. So thank you, Bill, for being willing to answer the people's questions. I really appreciate it.
Well, I just say quickly, also just realize Christ is so much greater than all this. And all the years, 16 years I spent in the occult is nothing compared to my 35 years or so now I've been serving Christ. And he's wonderful. His power is indomitable, and he's all powerful. And all the satanic stuff is just basically like this by comparison. So by all means, choose Christ over the occult, because you can't do both.
Amen. That's a great way to end it. Thank you. And God bless you. God bless your wife and your ministry. I hope he protects you, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are trying to get to you, but you've been protected. You're stayed alive all these years. So I'm confident that he will continue to keep you and protect you.
Amen.